But anyway, welcome to Philosophy Roulette 246. This is a requested stream from Cinesemiotics, where we're going to do a paper called The Medium is the Metaphor by Michael J. Quirk. Michael J. Quirk has some philosophy papers, although this specific one is not covered in Phil papers, but like Michael J. Quirk does do philosophy related things. So normally what we do is we just grab a random thing, that's why it's roulette, off the web. But instead what we're going to do now is we're going to do the request, because I also take requests. So, misclick. There we go. So if you want to grab the link anytime later during the Twitch stream, you can type !paper, and that'll the link will pop back up. I don't know if Cinesemiotics is here yet. Let's see if we've got I don't know if users in chat's gonna pop up. Nope, did not pop it up. So don't know where Cinesemiotics is, but he did say he would swing by. So we can also take a look for a paper to do after this. This is a 4-page paper, so we're gonna do a quick search for some other stuff for Philosophy Roulette 247 coming up after. So here we go. I didn't. Oh, did I? Doing. You know, I'm gonna update the stream info. This is not what it used to be. This is 246 is what this is, not 245. So here we go. Let's do. Yep. Probably should have done this before, but whatever, we're good to go now. Okay, so cool. Here we go for Philosophy Roulette 246. And maybe 247. Let's give Cinesemiotics a chance to show up. So let's see what's new in the world of philosophies. The essential superficiality of the voluntary and the moralization of psychology. Well, we are moralizing things. I guess psychology shouldn't be so surprised they got moralized. Well, let's click on it, see how long it is. Superficiality of the voluntary. 45 pages. I don't think so. Let's see what else is in Phil Studies. Nope, not QQ. It is a mouthful, cryonics. Philosophers are sort of amazing at, making up like these terrible sentences and like these really big words. It's a hobby we have, I guess. There's nothing shorter than 15 pages in all of Phil Studies. That's kind of amazing. So yeah, we're not reading Phil Studies. PPR, again, they like their long stuff. Same. But we can take a look at it. Transparency is surveillance. Now, C.T. Nguyen has written some fun papers. I think he writes on like food sometimes and on like video games. So this could be don't know what this is from when, but 72 pages. That is amazing. Wow, a 72-page paper. That's yeah. That would take me like days. So yeah, not gonna read that. Let's see if there's anything from replies, anything short here. This is reviews, comments. Monotonicity in the new miners puzzle. So we've got a looks like a 14-page paper here by Daniel Munoz and Jack Spencer. In the classic miners case, an agent subjectively ought to do what they know is objectively wrong. This case shows that the subjective and objective oughts are somewhat independent, but there remains a powerful intuition that the guidance of objective oughts is more authoritative, so long as we know what they tell us. We all argued that this intuition must be given up in light of monotonicity principle, in which undercuts the rationale for saying that objective oughts are authoritative. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to go by monotonicity, like things don't increase in knowledge at any point, you have to stick with your knowledge base, then you generally you're gonna run into problems. I could see that, what they're saying, but I don't really feel like reading this. Let's see what else we got. Resisting easy inferences. This is 6 pages. I like 6 pages. Let's see what we got. Otavio, come on. Upload your paper, Otavio. That's so annoying. Not available. I've seen Otavio Bueno speak. He seems like a good guy. That's so depressing. Like, I finally find a cool paper that's like short, and it's not available. Let's see. Telling and the reason of testimony. This looks like another review. Yeah, there's nothing here. How you doing, Cryonics? Hope you're well today. Okay. So, PPR is not being friendly. What are you going to do? Ooh, normativity, agency, and value. A view from aesthetics. And what was this? This is 10 pages. And this one here is 4 pages. So this looks like on aesthetics. Let's see. I am getting healthier. I'm still sick. One of the fun things that happened was that I've read stuff by Dominic Lopes before. Let's see how this looks. It's 8 pages, and it's not even the full side of a page. I like this. Okay, so we're going to read this, I think. Precis for Being for Beauty. So this is a review or a precis. I'm not sure what this actually is, but this is kind of fun. Alright, so we're going to download this thing. Yeah, so I've got a stomach bug, which screws up my stomach. And the medicine they gave me today also can screw with your stomach. So the chance of me having to run to the bathroom is exceedingly high at this point. So, yeah, which I find kind of funny. I feel okay, to tell you the truth, at the moment. Let's see if this worked. It did. Okay, let's actually, since Cinesemiotics is not here yet, we can update again. So we'll do this first. Yeah, it's been interesting, Cryonics. So we're gonna do this first, and then we'll get back to the other one afterwards. Okay, cool. So, here we go. Yeah, and as always, anyone who shows up in chat, Cryonics and everyone else, please feel free to ask questions along the way. This is my first time reading it too. So, Precis for Being for Beauty, Aesthetic Agency and Value by Dominic Lopes. Until the middle of the last century, much work on value gave pride of place to aesthetic value. G.E. Moore named beauty alongside friendship as by far the two greatest intrinsic goods, and C.I. Lewis devoted much of his analysis of knowledge and valuation to the place of the pursuit of beauty among the ends of life. Yet by the 1960s, aesthetic value had largely disappeared from the agenda in philosophy. Maybe the moral shock of the Second World War made it seem a diversion, or maybe the admonitions of the logical positivists made it seem intractable. Another conjecture spurs being for beauty. Aesthetic value has been off the agenda in philosophy in the sense that the party line, never defended, just taken for granted, is aesthetic hedonism, and aesthetic hedonism was only going to own a piece of the stage in value theory during the heyday of general value hedonism. Being for Beauty articulates and defends a new theory, the network theory of aesthetic value. In doing so, it aims to rekindle work on aesthetic value and to offer some insight into value and practical reasons more generally. Okay, so it looks like we've got a kind of a review. I'm not sure what's happening yet, but let's continue. The main argument for the network theory is a limited contrastive argument to the best explanation. The argument is limited because there is no consensus in philosophy on what needs explaining. Some explananda are therefore proposed in the hope of generating a discussion of whether the list is correct and complete. Limited arguments are tentative about explananda. The argument is contrastive because a case is made only when the network theory is superior to aesthetic hedonism, which is the only competition for now. According to aesthetic hedonism, an aesthetic value is a property of an item that stands in constitutive relation to its finally valuable experiences of those who correctly understand the item. Being vivid is an aesthetic value. The vividness of Cantor's diagonal proof is identical to or grounded in some of its other properties, ones that merit or dispose or induce those who understand it to respond with pleasure. Throughout the book, finally valuable experiences are called pleasures, with the understanding that pleasures are intellectual as well as sensory or affective. Arguments bring out what is at stake in a position, so the lack of arguments for aesthetic hedonism is a problem for it. In the circumstances, Being for Beauty reads contemporary strands of aesthetic hedonism against a background of general commitments that it shares as a common ground with network theory. Alright, so aesthetic hedonism, we just like beauty because it's like pleasurable then. That's fine. I mean, I don't actually know if that's how people think about things nowadays, but I mean, this author sort of takes it for granted that it at least has some standing in the community of people who talk about this stuff. I haven't actually thought about this, so I don't really know where, because this is sort of like placing aesthetic value somewhere, and on like some sort of scheme of how it acts on us, and I haven't thought about that, so for all I know, it sounds okay. But anywho, like, how does aesthetics, like, where does it hit us? It hits us in the pleasures. And that's what the finally valuable stuff is up here. So, called the pleasures, the finally valuable experiences. Boom. Aesthetic beauty hits us in the pleasures. And that's in the last finally valuable, the last analysis. Okay. So first is a distinction between aesthetic value and artistic value. Aesthetic value is found in the works of art, but also in nature, design, games, and sports, religion, and the world of ideas. In addition, many artistic values are not aesthetic. They are moral, political, cognitive, or practical instead. Nowadays, too many philosophers who acknowledge these points still use artistic and aesthetic interchangeably, and still gravitate towards work of art for examples. Aesthetics must sense all sides of aesthetic life. Second, a theory of aesthetic value might answer two questions. A proof's vividness is an aesthetic value, but not a journalist's integrity or an activist's courage. The demarcation question asks what makes some values distinctly aesthetic. However, knowing what makes a proof's vividness an aesthetic value leaves open what makes it the case that its being vivid gives anyone reason to do anything. The normative question asks what makes it the case that an item's aesthetic value gives anyone reason to do anything. Yeah, so if it hits you in the aesthetics and the pleasures are one of these sort of aesthetic things. What does that mean for you? Like, why does it why bother? It's a good question. Only the normative question is addressed by the network theory and contemporary versions of aesthetic hedonism. Both punt on demarcation. To operationalize punting on demarcation, being for beauty adopts a working conception. A value is aesthetic when it is a paradigm aesthetic value. The idea is to stick with uncontroversial cases for the time being. I mean, yeah, but what the heck is that? Like a paradigm aesthetic value. Okay. Third, the network theory and aesthetic hedonism answer the normative question in a way that is at home in the standard framework for thinking about practical reasons. Aesthetic reasons are worldly facts, such as the fact that the proof is vivid. Facts such as these are empirical or theoretical reasons, but they are also practical reasons. They lend weight to the proposition that A should phi in C. Thus, the fact that the proof is vivid lends weight to the proposition that Aisha should appreciate it in some circumstances. What explains her actual appreciating it is that she evaluates it as vivid. Her evaluating it as vivid is a motivating reason. Aesthetic acts are ones motivated by aesthetic evaluations. The book captures all this common ground in three framing assumptions. Evaluation. A state is an aesthetic evaluation if and only if the state is a mental representation of some item as having some aesthetic value. Act. A's phi-ing is an aesthetic act if and only if A's phi-ing counterfactually depends on the content of A's aesthetic evaluation of X, where A's phi-ing operates on X. And reason. Reason, the fact that X is V is an aesthetic reason for A to phi in C, if and only if the fact that X is V lends weight to the proposition that A aesthetically should phi in C. To answer the normative question is to give it an informative reduction of the right-hand side of reason, one that completes the schema. An aesthetic value V is reason-giving, means the fact that X is V lends weight to the proposition that. Aesthetic hedonism naturally fills in the dots. Since being vivid stands in the constitutive relation to pleasure, it lends weight to the proposition that Aisha should appreciate it in C. Appreciating the proof delivers the pleasure, and anyone always has, maybe not decisive, reason to do what delivers pleasure. Aesthetic hedonists nowadays answer the normative question by appeal to plain vanilla hedonic normativity. Yeah, so we like pleasure, so we're going to go find it out, seek it out. Finally, to some explananda. Being for Beauty opens with the case studies of several aesthetic experts who perform reliably well, solving problems through their aesthetic activities. They are a gardener and her grandson who restore the garden to life, a photographer who promotes the work of her predecessor, a talk show host who started a book club, you can guess, a video game source code sleuth, and a dance educator. 6 observations about these cases need explaining. Aesthetic experts hail from almost all demographic niches. They jointly cover the whole aesthetic universe. They specialize by aesthetic domain, gardens versus photography. They specialize by activity, restoring versus promoting, where specialization by activity and domain interact, restoring gardens versus restoring games, making photographs versus promoting photographs, and their expertise is relatively stable. What happened there? Something update? Whatever. Philosophers' work in aesthetics will be surprised by the case studies and the explananda. The prevalent image of the aesthetic, Aristotle. You're raiding? That's what was happening. This thing started to load, and I'm like, huh? What's going on? Mustard. Yes, hello, Aristotle and all the mustard repeating crew, I guess I could call you. Yo, Joe Malone Williams, Aristotle, Warm Winter, welcome. Yeah, Aristotle, I was lurking your stream mostly, but explananda is an explanation, basically. Explananda is the Latin, because you got the explanans and the explananda. So you got the things being explained and the explanation. That's what it is in your eyeball. It's a fancy word for talking about explanations. Yeah, so thanks for the raid, man. I appreciate it. I promised I would stream tonight, so I had to jump on at a reasonable hour. So, yeah, so that's all. We're reading this paper by on beauty actually, and we're talking about aesthetic hedonism. So apparently, beauty causes pleasure, and if you're an aesthetic hedonist, that just means like, hey, you like pleasure, so let's go look for more beauty because that's what hedonists do. And so, if you're an aesthetic hedonist, you are someone who seeks out beautiful things for the pleasure that it gives you. So that's kind of what that. Yeah. So cool. Feel free to ask questions. I'm just reading this the first time. That's kind of what I do here. So yeah, it's philosophy roulette. I grab a random paper, read it, see what happens. That's kind of what I do, and try and see what makes it tick in some sense. We're not here to like tear anyone down. We're just basically here to see why someone wrote this paper. Like why did anyone bother? As Aristotle says, like, what's the point? Like, you have to make people care about what you're writing about, and yeah. So that's kind of what I'm doing. All right, so here's where we are. Philosophers working in aesthetics will be surprised by the case studies and the explananda. The prevalent image of the aesthetic expert is a consummate appreciator and critic, a Bernard Berenson or an F.R. Leavis. The demographics of the prevalent image are terrible, and it stems from two errors. One is to confuse aesthetic evaluation with aesthetic appreciation. Beginner mathematicians might judge, based on testimony, that the diagonal proof is vivid and yet be unable to appreciate it. Confusing aesthetic evaluation with aesthetic appreciation occasions a second error, which takes all aesthetic acts to be or to involve acts of appreciation. And in truth, a source code sleuth needs to evaluate the game she's working on, typically without playing the game. Although aesthetic hedonism encourages both errors, it commits to neither. So the book assumes as common ground a distinction between appreciation and evaluation, and the wide view of aesthetic acts as that the distinction opens up. Yeah, so you have to be able to understand what's going on and why it's pleasurable. So it's not just you have to just be like it's pleasurable, but you have to also, it's a different thing to completely understand like exactly what is happening here. Whereas the best version of aesthetic hedonism are consistent with most of the explananda, the network theory predicts all six. Here is the official statement. Aesthetic value V is reason-giving, meaning the fact that X is V lends weight to the proposition that it would be an aesthetic achievement for some A to phi and C, where X is an item in an aesthetic practice, K, and A's competence to phi is aligned upon an aesthetic profile that is constitutive of K. That's a mouthful. So basically, if something is like vivid and you can feel it, then it's like, well, you get all these things that come all along with it. Commentators remark that the theory packs in many moving parts. Yeah, it's a lot. Start with achievement. To achieve is to perform an act successfully as a result of competence. Right there we have the key ingredient of an answer to the normative question. Anyone who acts at all thereby has reason to succeed and to use their competence to succeed. So if the fact that a proof is vivid lends weight to it being an achievement for Aisha to appreciate it, she has reason thereby to appreciate it. The network theory answers the normative question by appeal to plain vanilla practical normativity. Yeah, I guess it's like if you put some effort and you want to not waste your time, but like that doesn't seem much of a motivation. So, but like still, you put your time in, you want to get something out of it, which is fair. That's like practical normativity. It's like if I go look at a piece of art, I'm like, all right, I turned my head that way. But I mean, the amount of like effort taking to look at pieces of art and like maybe really appreciate it, okay, there's a little bit more there. But how much effort are you really putting in? I guess the more you put in, the more you get out. So maybe if you like study the piece of art, you'll like it better. And that does happen. Okay. Yeah. Anyone have any like hard to appreciate art that they like? I mean, the thing is, it's like Picasso. You know, people at first, like, they're like, oh, I want a pretty painting. Picasso didn't make, like, pretty paintings. Like, you've got people with, like, weirdly shaped faces and stuff, but you can appreciate it and be like, wow, this is great art. You watch awful movies? Well, why are they awful, Warm Winter? Are they campy, or are they just really boring? I doubt you're watching, like, really boring movies. You like poorly made films? Are you, like, laughing at them, like Mystery Science Theater? You just want to, like, poke fun? But you see, this is the question. Like, you put some time and effort in. Why are you putting the time and effort into it? You watch really boring movies. That's awesome, Warm Winter. Aristotle says, I guess it really depends on what we mean by pleasure at what level. Yeah, so this is not entirely clear what kind of pleasure we're getting. Pleasure is just the end sort of goal in a lot of this. Yeah, so you're sort of watching them to laugh at them, Warm Winter. Yeah, see, that's one of these things. Like, there's, like, good movies all the way over here, and then you move over to, like, not so good movies, and then there's, like, bad movies, and then there's, like, terrible movies, and then there's movies that, like, it turns so bad that it's actually kind of entertaining. And there's a limit there that, like, people try to theorize about sometimes. There's first order pleasure, like, I like that sculpture. Then there's something, like, more abstract, like second order, I like that I look at the sculpture. Yeah, I think they're just talking hedonistic, I like it. First order Aristotle here. Warm Winter, some of it is, Warm Winter is apparently a masochist. Plus you believe in watching terrible movies helps you appreciate good movies. That's fair. Like, you might need to take a survey of, like, a kind of a section of movies. You see the second order all over. Aristotle sees the second order all over the place. Like, people who really love Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian, you're convinced, don't actually like the novel. They like having slogged through something big, dense, and pretentious. That does happen. I think that's kind of what this network theory is talking about right here. They seem to think that putting a lot of effort in makes it more appreciable. And there is something to that. I mean, I might call that a sunk cost fallacy, where you put a lot of time in, so you want to get something out. But still, it is a thing. People do that. And so just because it's maybe not a good thing, that doesn't make it inherently aesthetically wrong. So. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, you can see that there's something going on here where you've got two different conceptions, where this one's talking more about, like, the cost involved in the art, and the other one is just talking about the pleasure. And you get the pleasure directly from the hedonist one. It's like, okay, it's beautiful, it's pleasurable, done. And this one's talking more about the second order thing. So thank you, Aristotle, because it actually clarifies what's going on a little bit more clearly, that, people like getting through big books. They do. I mean, you can judge them for that, but that's not... I mean, it is a thing that people like that. Okay. Let's see, we got to slog through this now, but it's only another few pages. Obviously, the first clause of the reduction does not predict the explananda. The task is to show how the achievement clause generates the rest of the theory. Yes, this is the achievement clause. What are you achieving in doing this thing? I'll get to your comment in a sec. As we saw, there are many types of aesthetic act, editing and restoring, not just appreciating. Each act type has characteristic success conditions and exploits different skills. Suppose you take and promote photographs. You have different aims and must bring different skills to bear. Your having reason to achieve as a photographer and as a promoter is thereby reason for you to take photographs as a kind that you can promote, and to promote in a way that fits the photographs you take. Okay. Aristotle says, one of my best friend's dad would take him around to artsy movies whenever he was in high school. His dad would always ask him, does it have titties or lasers? My friend would always be so annoyed. But as we've gotten older, we've seen his dad's wisdom, as crass as it is. Titties or lasers? It's a fair question. There's a hilarious guy, what was it, Art Thoughts with, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but it's called Art Thoughts, and you can go, with your boy something, and so it's this guy who has obviously massive, like, background in, like, art theory, and he's, like, very well schooled, but he dresses up in a complete hip-hop way, and he talks in, like, the hip-hop style, and then he goes and he talks about art stuff. And so he's talking about beauty one time, and he says, look, there's a reason we need beauty. It's like you're not going to get your painting looked at if it's like you have like ugly people in it. You put a beautiful girl in it, they're going to look at it and they're going to appreciate it more because they're looking at the girl. But like, yeah, Hennessy Youngman, thank you, Aristotle. Yes, art thoughts with Hennessy the Youngman. Fun thing, I actually was in an art gallery in New York and they had videos of him playing. It was like, all right, so they had like an art gallery with like videos of him like giving his art thoughts while we were walking around looking at the art. And it turned out that my cousin's girlfriend, one of her best friends went to school with him. So, yeah. Art thoughts with the Hennessy Youngman, that is something everyone should check out. It was a great YouTube series that he had put together. Okay. Since that is demanding, you have achievement-based reason to specialize in one activity and find a partner who specializes in the other. For that to work, you and your partner must be on the same page aesthetically. You must agree on the aesthetic profile of the photographs, modernist, not pictorialist, for example. Indeed, you must be so coordinated around the same aesthetic profile that your joint activities are explained by appeal to a norm to comply in a relatively stable way with the aesthetic profile. You are now in a social practice wherein your reason to achieve is often reason to comply with the norm. Finally, your reason to achieve in this way drives more specialization. The practice comes to be populated by agents with many different kinds of expertise. They specialize by refining the aesthetic profile, which leads to more aesthetic domains. The profile of photographs splits into pictorialist versus modernist. Modernism splits into the mode of decisive moment versus that of revealing formalism, and so on. Members of any social group interacting non-aesthetically will have reason to step on the aesthetic specialization escalator. Plain vanilla practical normativity predicts the six explananda. Okay, so basically, the more you work at something, the more reason you have to specialize. Even in aesthetics. Okay. The main argument for the network theory, namely that it handles the six explananda better than aesthetic hedonism, is meant to persuade and also to enrich the pool of resources we have to think about aesthetic value. The distinction between demarcation and normativity, the application of the standard meta-normative framework, and the six explananda give us far more to work with than we ever had when we just took aesthetic hedonism for granted. In the same spirit, the final chapters of the book offer 5 bonus arguments for the network theory that empower thinking about aesthetic value. Yeah, this is kind of hard to parse, Warm Winter. You don't read stuff like this? Yeah, no one reads stuff like this. I'm the only nutcase that reads stuff like this on Twitch. I mean, most people, when they read this like, getting very drunk in like a bar somewhere. No, they read it at home quietly, and they reread it many times so that they can understand it. So fair enough. But that's why I read it. It's like I read it here. We try to go over it. If it makes sense, cool. If not, it's okay. So, like I said, but ask questions. If you find something interesting, just comment on it and we can talk more about it. Chapter 8 on aesthetic motivation takes the sting out of the implication that aesthetic value is not tied constitutively to pleasure. It also makes the case for aesthetic reasons externalism, that the thesis that the fact that the proof is vivid is reason for Aisha to appreciate it, even if she cannot be motivated to appreciate it by evaluating it as vivid. The Cryonics, that Cuneo paper went way over your head. Well, this is the problem with that was actually a book selection paper, and so I think it was written a little differently. It wasn't written to be so. It was written to fit into the book in some sense. Not written for like journal stuff, and so sometimes that stuff goes way over your head, and sometimes it's a little too focused on what happens like in that area. So it was kind of a hard paper, especially in like the middle section of it, because it was going over a lot of details. It wasn't a bad paper, it was just going over a lot of details in the middle of the paper, which happens. So it's like, not every paper is going to be for everyone. That's kind of why I wrote why the name of this show is Roulette. It's like, yeah, you're going to get some you like and some you don't like as much, but it's cool. Certain worries about disagreement galvanize traditional thinking about aesthetic values. Chapter 9 articulates the worries that dispel them by showing how they missed the key role that disagreement plays in smoothing aesthetic interaction by establishing and also modifying the profiles of aesthetic practices. Likewise, Chapter 10 tackles traditions worries about the response dependence of aesthetic value. Yeah, this is a book report. That's right. This is like someone going over what a book is telling you and where it's going. Sorry, I didn't make that clear earlier. Distinguish two facts. The proof is vivid. One is an aesthetic reason. And see, this is a reason to do something about the proof. The normative question asks what it is about the vividness that makes two the case, and the network theory answers by reducing aesthetic normativity to plain vanilla practical normativity. But is one a response-dependent fact? No. The proof's vividness is grounded in its other features, not in the features of us. Granted, the grounding comes with the social practice, and facts about us ground the fact that the practice is our practice. However, what we have is the fact that X is V is grounded in the fact that X is F, and in addition, the fact that X is V is grounded in the fact that X is F is grounded by facts about us. From this, it does not follow that the fact is grounded by the fact that X is V. Okay, basically it's saying, look, the beauty's in the art, and it's not in us. It has the fact that the proof is vivid or the painting is beautiful, that has nothing to do with us. And the fact that it is an aesthetic reason is because how we approach it. But the proof being a certain way or a painting being a certain way, that has to do with the painting and not has to do with how we are approaching it. Okay, so we're just finishing up right here. Two closing chapters mull what draws us to aesthetics in the first place. We want to know how engaging with beauty contributes to a life that goes well. Chapter 11 answers that achievement-based engagement in aesthetic practices sources meaning. Don't understand that. And well-being for individuals. Chapter 12 moves from the individual to the collective level, scouting the reasons we have to support aesthetic practices of which we are not members. Aesthetic goods are collective as well as personal goods. Yeah, I mean, this is the question. Like, what are we getting out of aesthetics? If it's just straight pleasure, that would seem really weird because it seems like aesthetics does more than just pleasure. So there is something to it. For centuries, philosophical attitudes to beauty have swung from overblown and even rapturous glorification to neglect or suspicion. Swings as wild as these cannot capture the truth about our aesthetic lives, where epiphanies and disasters are rare, but where modest goods abound. The deepest commitment of being for beauty is to bracket the outliers and make sense of where the data points mass. We have an opportunity to get a better grip on values and reasons in general by studying one domain where values and their practical entanglements are concrete, but also unencumbered by weighty authorities, the sting of reactive attitudes, and the pressures of emergencies. Okay, cute little book report. We got like a flavor of what the book is about. Basically, it's about this, like, okay, when you engage with art, you're engaging with a network of sort of like what the art is sort of doing to you, and how you do that is not just like that you appreciate it, but that it hits you in a certain way. So that's the demarcation thing. It's that the art hits you in a certain way and you can appreciate it differently from how it hits you. And so once you make that distinction, then you can like say, well, how do you work through it? And as Aristotle was saying earlier, look, some people kind of get pleasure out of working through hard problems. And maybe that isn't so much what the artwork itself is giving to you, but in some sense you're putting into it. And so this is a way to analyze what's going on there. And maybe that's even not even to be looked down upon. Maybe that's something that we should value in how we interact with art in different ways, be it, say, photography or making video games or restoring video games, as the example was here. Maybe there is a value in how you work through these complicated issues to get at the aesthetic pleasure. So if you're interested in stuff like that, you might want to check out the book. Okay, so now we have no cinesemiotics still, even though this was a requested stream. So I don't know what we're going to do. We'll go read another.